Nigel Farage claimed Britain cannot afford to stay in the EU while accusing former Prime Minister Tony Blair of sacrificing a large chunk of Margaret Thatcher's rebate in return for absolutely nothing, unearthed reports reveal. Support for Nigel Farage's new Brexit party has recently shot up the polls to put them side to side with Labour ahead of the European parliamentary elections on the 23rd of May. In yet another devastating blow for Theresa May, the latest poll from Opinium suggests the prominent Eurosceptic is set to rake in 28% of the vote next month. The study also revealed that Mr. Farage would make a dent in Conservative support if a general election was called, with the Brexit party expected to take 17% of the vote. The former UKIP leader promised a democratic revolution to ensure Britain's vote to leave the EU is honoured and vowed to change politics for good. Despite never winning a seat as a British MP in the House of Commons, Mr. Farage helped persuade more than 17 million people to vote to leave the EU in the 2016 referendum. His battle against the bully superstate has been long running, and even though he is a highly divisive figure in the UK, even his critics concede the influence he has had. In 2014, the Financial Times published figures which showed that Tony Blair's decision to agree to a 7% cut in the rebate negotiated by Margaret Thatcher in 1984 had cost the economy £7 billion over the course of 7 years. Mrs. Thatcher famously negotiated a reduction of 2/3 in the UK's net contribution to the bloc on the grounds that agricultural subsidies favoured small farmers and Britain has very few. She banged on the table and demanded our own money back during a summit with European leaders in Fontainebleau, France. However, after Mr. Blair agreed to a cut, the rebate fell from £5.4 billion in 2009 to only £3.3 billion in 2013. Figures published by the Financial Times showed, in addition, total payments from the UK rose from £14.1 billion to £17.2 billion. At the time, UKIP leader Mr. Farage made a brilliant point about the bloc and questioned whether Britain could afford to remain in the European club. He told the Mail Online, "Thank you Mr. Blair for sacrificing a large chunk of the British rebate in return for absolutely nothing. Much of the money that has come back to Britain has been used to make rich landowners richer, through the Common Agriculture Policy. The question is no longer can we afford to leave, it is can we afford to stay." Robert Oxley, of the campaign group Business for Britain, also echoed Mr. Farage's Eurosceptic sentiments. He said at the time, "We've been pouring more and more money into the EU every year, only to see far too much of it squandered. Tony Blair threw away much of our rebate in return for empty promises of reform that never materialized. It's about time Brussels curbed its spending, rather than making extra demands on the UK because our economy is growing." The UK's gross budget contribution to the EU for 2019 is €17.49 billion, £15.10 billion.